order to have days like this, you're going to have days like this. This is Tips on Tuesday. We're going to talk about what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. Stay tuned so you don't feel like doing this. If you like these videos, please subscribe and give us a like. And if you have anything to add to the conversation or any questions, please leave them below.
So are we sitting the right distance apart, or do we need to come in closer, or what do you think?
I just want to get as close to you as I can.
I knew that. I'm okay with it.
You really? All right, let's do it. All right.
We have a binder with whatever the emergency is, so at the port engine room fire, starboard auxiliary machinery space fire, crew quarters fire, galley fire, whatever that is. And on that page is all the ventilation that needs to be shut down for that space, where the closest fire hydrants are, where the fire extinguishers are, what circuit breakers need to be shut down to isolate the space. Now, small boat, a lot easier because your systems are smaller, but small boat, you don't have the compartmentalization that we do on a big ship. You're basically one big open compartment. You've got...
Not the ML, Super Mario, we have 3 compartments that are watertight.
Watertight?
Doors. Yeah, watertight doors.
That's a good boat.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
That's why I like it.
most don't. I mean, you might have internal cabin doors.
Well, the catamarans,
right?
They have 2 watertight.
They've got 2 boats.
Yeah, they got 2 boats.
Sailing in loose formation with each other.
Sometimes. Hopefully not too loose.
Right. But that's the thing. So we have make yourself that book, or it might not be a book. It might just be a flip card. And even if you didn't use it in an emergency, if once a week, just because you're bored and sailing, you might say, okay, so now we have the propane tank leaked in the lazarette and something caught it on fire. What are we going to do?
I think that's that's one of the things that as and me included, I have a list of the things that I need to do to put Aquarius to bed.
Mm-hmm.
A list of things I have to do right before I take off on a sailing. And all of those things. What is that? Are you listening to the radio?
Like an alarm.
But anyways, I have all of that, listed out, but I don't have the safety procedures listed out. And as much as I've wanted to do a safety procedure deal,
something else always gets in the way.
it.
Something gets in the way, right?
I know. I have a list of lists to make.
Right.
Yeah, and you and Kim are on a RV now.
Right.
You actually have to do the same thing.
And we have checklists. We have underway checklists, setting up checklists, put it to bed checklists, the same kind of thing. Now, our safety is living. We can run away, from it, but.
I've mentioned that I think that we should drill sometimes, because it seems like if you have ever had a problem on the ship, everybody knows right what to do. Or like you said, we smelled gas the other day in the RV. I smelled gas. You said on the ship, everybody would just go right. Like nobody would have to be told what to do. They just know.
Right, and it's because you drill it and you practice everywhere. You get the smell of smoke on a ship, and every single person comes out, dressed, undressed, doesn't matter, sleeping, wherever they come out and they're looking for the source of the smoke.
So I see a benefit to drilling. I think as a reasonable adult, we should do that.
Yeah, so for example, on your boat,
the firearms, or
Mm-hmm.
drill for situations, danger situations.
Sure. Do you have a go bag on your boat?
Yeah, but I tell you what, now we've gotten so comfortable, and that's one of the biggest problems. As soon as you start getting comfortable, that's when you start making mistakes. If, many times I don't act like I'm nervous. I don't, and I'm not nervous now coming into a marina.
Mm-hmm.
It's like no problem. But I'm getting to the point where I'm not really nervous about going out to sea, and that's when you have to always, be nervous. It's just like, because you can make a mistake. You will make a mistake.
Right, not you can, you will. I've been out there for 41 years. I make mistakes every trip.
Yeah.
You know, they're little, and we have systems in place to catch them, right? Or I self-catch them, but sure, of course I do.
Yeah, and people have to realize that, you're not as smart as you think you are.
Exactly right.
And you have to make sure that you second guess yourself all the time.
Right.
And another thing that I tell, the people that are going sailing, don't even act like you know everything about everything, because you don't. And then what you do is, if you act like you know everything about everything, you alienate the other sailors that know just a little bit more than you, and then they don't want to tell you what the right thing to do is.
And on that same line, you also alienate the sailors that know less than you, and they're just as valuable. Just like the airline industry adopted 30 some years ago, the shipping industry has adopted. In the airline industry, they call it cockpit resource management. We call it bridge resource management. And the thing is that if you're the skipper of your boat, if you're the person that has the command authority, you have to instill the environment where anyone on that boat can question, why are we doing this? Something's wrong here. And you do that through not berating people or not telling them that they don't know what they're talking about. If someone says, well, why are we doing this? You give them a good answer. Because what will happen is 99 times out of 100, it'll be something that they just don't understand that perhaps you do, and you knew that was coming as expected. But it's the one time that they saw something that you didn't that they'll save your bacon. I instill the atmosphere on my bridge that anyone sees anything, tell me. I will never, ever bark at anyone for bringing something up or questioning why I'm doing something, because it's not a challenge to my authority or my knowledge. It's just they have an observation they don't understand. I want them to understand why we're doing this, because at worst, they learn. And at best, they catch me doing something stupid. And I've been caught missing something or doing something stupid. Right? And I will thank them for that and praise them in front of everyone and make that a lesson. After we get through the situation, we'll get together and discuss, okay, what was missed, what happened, who caught it, put the halo on their head for being that person who speaks up. The autocratic skipper is the one who is looking for a fall.
And that, I've been guilty of that exact same thing with my wife. And I tell you what, if you're with your wife sailing, you need to listen to her, and because there are times where she might know more than you or see something you don't, and she's right and you're wrong, and then something happens, and then what's going to happen. At least I do.
When you're out on the ocean in a small boat, you have very few resources. You don't want to shut down any of them. And one of those resources is the people that are with you. All of them are valuable. All of them can catch something that you don't. Bringing them into that drill training cycle so that they know where the seacocks are, or where the fresh and salt water valves are on the boat, or where the circuit breakers are, and what should be shut down and what shouldn't be shut down, and how to do that. You're hiring free firefighters or free damage control technicians on your boat by doing that. Highly recommend it.
Is there anything else that you think is important on a boat that we haven't discussed yet?
Well, as you know, you're on a very small life support system on a very big ocean. So as we talked about before, pre-planning whatever disasters you think can happen. There are things that go bump in the night when you're on a fiberglass boat. It's pretty easy to stove it in. I think you're probably aware, your community is aware of the number of containers that are floating free around the world. Somehow they're able to do it just below the surface of the ocean and float for significant lengths of time. They will put a hole in your boat. So the question you ask yourself is, if we get a hull breach in the middle of the night, how do we contain that in the very few minutes that you have to do it before you start losing buoyancy to the point where you can't recover from it. So know your equipment, carry safety equipment, know how to use it, drill with your crew on how to use it, and drill frequently. On the big ships, we do it once a week at a minimum, and usually there's some other drill during the week that comes on a monthly or quarterly or 6-month interval. So we spend, as commercial seamen, we spend a significant amount of our time drilling and planning for bad things to happen. Hopefully they never do, but if they do happen, and some bad always happens, it's a whole lot better to have thought about it ahead of time and know what to do when the time comes.
So what I've told people is, this is very similar to flying an airplane. Both of us are
Absolutely.
pilots. Both of us, captains of our own little vessels. Yours bigger than mine. But, and all pilots know, what do you have? You have a list. You have a checklist for everything. If this happens, you got a checklist for it. If this happens, you have a checklist for it. And there's no reason why us on a little boat shouldn't have a checklist for just about everything as well.
Right.
Because there is going to be a time where I'm incapacitated, and then somebody else is at the helm, and they have to have a checklist so they know what to do, because they're not going to know what to do.
Sure. Not only a checklist, but experience at that position they're going to have to be that they're going to have to take over. So your second in command, maybe it's your significant other or wife or husband, but they should be the one who knows how to steer the vessel, to bring it about, to pick you up when your dumbass falls overboard, or how to get the boat the last 500 miles on a passage if the worst happens and the captain is incapacitated. All right. The flip side of that is, the reason that you sail is because it's fun and it's enjoyable. Is that by having checklists, you can reduce your stress level because things have been pre-thought of. You've checked them. You've done the things you're supposed to do, and so you don't have the worry of saying, "What am I missing here?"
Exactly.
So makes it more fun, less stressful.
So one of the things that I questioned you about was that passenger vessel that went down in Europe, just off, was it Gilia Island?
I'm trying to remember. What's the company?
The one with the yellow stack.
Right.
Costa
Coastal line. The
Costa Concordia.
Concordia, right.
So anyways, that one made a turn, and it, when you turn a boat, and the same with the small boats, if you turn a sailboat, the back end moves.
Right. It's not like your car. The front end doesn't turn, the back end turns. And the point that it pivots from changes, is whether you're moving forward or whether you're accelerating into a turn or decelerating into a turn, the point that it pivots. Now, a large ocean liner like that, like most deep sea vessels, that pivot point's about 1/3 from the bow to the stern. About the 1/3 aft mark is where it turns. So what he did was he saw himself getting into trouble. Well, one, he didn't follow his voyage plan. He wasn't on the pre-planned track. He was doing something that was unplanned. Best way to get yourself in trouble at sea or in an airplane is do something unplanned, right, without pre-thinking it. So he did it unplanned. He got too close. He tried to turn away, and you're exactly right. He didn't lift the bow away. He dropped the stern down onto the rocks. The only way you can turn is to move the stern downwind, like getting set downwind in a sailboat. You have to turn downwind before you can move upwind, or up sea, up environmental.
And the same thing with a sailboat. You do that in close quarters, your back end's going to move into something before your front end comes around.
Right.
So if you're in a marina situation, we're actually just like the big boats, because we're super close to things, and we can get screwed up, turning at the wrong time.
Right. And the time to learn that stuff, if you haven't taken a course or have gotten simulator training, which the vast majority of recreational sailors don't get because it's expensive, is, go out on the nice day, set up a float pattern in relatively shallow water where you can take a life jacket or a float or a buoy and make yourself a dock, an artificial dock, and approach it from downwind, approach it from upwind. If you run over a buoy, no harm, no foul, right? But learn to come up into it, learn your vessel's pivot points, you know, how much power do you have, how well does she back down or go astern, and do that in good weather when it's not blowing and not raining and not at night and you're not tired and you don't have to get to the dock before the storm comes in. Learn to handle your boat in good weather for fun before you have to do it for real. We do the exact same thing on big ships. If we have any spare time in our schedule, we stop and we either when you're new, you train you practice yourself. When you've been doing it a while and you have it down, you bring your junior officers up and just let them play with the boat and learn how it maneuvers and how it turns and how it comes ahead and astern.
Yeah, and I think that that's a good thing to do with your first mate, no matter who it is, whether it's your wife, girlfriend, or whatever. You know, have her, you know, set up that course and have her, you know, go in it. I haven't done that yet. I'm as guilty as anybody else.
And allow them to make mistakes.
Yeah.
You know, Kim and I in our RV, Kim has some maneuvering experience, but I'll be guilty too. We've talked about, let's go out on the parking lot, let's set the cones up, let's practice the maneuvering. We haven't gotten around to it. We need to. So
yeah, there's always something else that's
right.
more important. But you know, before you take off on your circumnavigation, you know, do these things. That's one of the first things you do. You know, go in, set up your electronics, figure out what you're gonna take with you, what's important, do all of that stuff, but also teach each other how to move that boat properly.
Exactly, and that's a very good point too. Like you say, when you're planning the circumnavigation, if you find that you're running out of time to do safety training, to learn how your boat maneuvers, to do your voyage planning, to do that, that's the time where you need to rethink, do I actually need to make this deadline, or am I trying to compress too much into too short a time? Because if you go off without having pre-planned, pre-trained, pre-practiced, you are setting yourself up for disaster.
Agree.
Right? We're doing this for fun, right? Keep that in mind when you're thinking about schedules.
Yeah, and the worst thing you can do is, you know, on the smaller boats like ours, it's like to have a preset schedule. That's the last thing you do. What's the first thing they tell you when you get your pilot's license?
Right.
If you have to be there, what?
Right. If there's time to spare, go by air. Right. If you have to be there, have an alternate way of getting to where you need to go.
What they say is if you have to be there, you go commercial.
Right.
You don't fly yourself.
Exactly.
Because the smaller planes are less capable of getting through the weather, less capable of
just
going
like smaller boats.
Yep.
Yep.
That's true.
Exactly.
And so it's like people don't understand. If you put yourself up against a time, you know, that you have to be there, you know,
that fosters bad decisions.
Yeah, and you might not get the weather window you want. You might get the weather you want, but now you have to go slower because you have no wind, and then you get stuck in the next front that comes through, and that clobbers you. Right. So it's like there's so many things that, you know, could go wrong if you don't just go per, you know, the safety factors. You don't take all the safety factors. If it's just, oh, I got to go pick up my girlfriend at the, you know, airport at this particular place, you're just setting yourself up for problems.
Exactly. Even on a very capable, very fast vessel, we operate in the Far East, where, as many of you know, the typhoons are a huge weather factor for most of the year, as much as 8 months of the year. We're under tremendous commercial and operational pressure to get from port A to port B, and sometimes what we call crossing the T on a typhoon, going in front of it as its track is perpendicular to your planned route. And there's many times that we cancel because I don't figure how fast can I get across that in front of that storm on 4 engines at 35 knots. I ask myself the question, how fast can I get across there with just 1 engine operating at 8 knots? And if I can't do it on 1 engine at 8 knots, I don't go. Because as sure as heck, if I put myself in that position, somehow 3 engines will go down. That's just the law of the universe.
Yeah, I just told my friend we're on our way to the airport. I just dropped him off a little while ago, and I said, it's 1 out of 100 if a plane doesn't take off for non-weather reasons. And 2 airplanes, he got bumped off one, and then he got bumped onto another one, and then that one stopped, and it wasn't going to take off.
Right.
One of them was a computer error, and the other one was, they probably stuck somebody else's luggage on the plane.
Yeah.
But
yeah, there you go.
Go figure.
Yep. Yeah. So assume when we sail on the big ships, we assume what's the worst we think can happen. What's the storm's going to go faster than predicted. It's going to turn earlier than predicted. We're going to go slower than we think we are, and only if it's still safe with all those factors accounted for, then we don't go. Does that enrage ship managers and customers? Yes, right? But it allows you to stay alive and sail the next day.
Yeah, and you got to think about all your passengers, because the guy that took off into weather in the Caribbean, I think there was 9 people aboard. All of them are dead.
Yeah.
And you make a mistake, you go at the wrong time. That's what happens.
Yep. Exactly. Okay.
What else you got to say for yourself, dude?
I didn't do it.
Didn't do what? Well, Adam.
Let's see. What else? Let me see if there's anything else we might be interesting for you guys to hear from our end. Just that you're small and annoying and.
Thanks a lot, Adam.
No, okay. Keep in mind that I would say keep in mind that if you ever are in distress at sea in a small boat, vessels will come to help you. But what they're going to do is they're going to come there and they're going to offer to assist in saving your life. They're not going to offer to assist in saving your vessel, right? It's when ships respond, and they have a duty to respond to distress calls at sea, and every mariner I have ever met feels that's a personal obligation to do that. However, they are under commercial pressure. They're not out there as a life-saving organization, and they aren't out there to save pleasure boaters from mistakes that they make. So they'll come. They'll risk their crew to help get you off your vessel and onto theirs. But they're not going to wait around to see if your vessel sinks. They're not going to take it in tow. They're not going to try to lift it aboard. So understand that if you're in a situation where you're calling for a distress call, it's because you think you might die and you don't want to, not because you're trying to save your boat. It's harsh reality.
Have you ever been involved in taking some sailors off their boats?
I've not had to take. We've assisted people. We've dropped motor oil to a vessel that who had gone through there, had an oil leak and didn't have an engine, and so we've gone by and dropped them. I've had several friends that have been involved in search and rescue operations, and in fact one in the North Atlantic where they had a 50-foot sailboat that had 2 couples on it. The ship they were sinking. They took on water, big seas, 25, 30-foot seas. The ship came to make a lee for them. They were able to talk to both couples on board. They brought the sailboat alongside the big vessel or maneuvered the large ship to make a lee for the sailboat to try to get the people on board. They had pilot ladders over the side, nets over the side so that they could climb up. But combination of cold water hypothermia setting in, and just the size of the seas. The sailboat was picked up, hit into the side of the ship, broke apart. People couldn't hold on to the net, just their hands were too cold, and the crew watched them die right in front of them. And so you can have that rescue get right to you and still not succeed. So pick your weather, plan your voyages, be conservative. The other piece of advice I'd have is just always, always, always remember that a weather forecast is not reality. That is a dart on the wall. It's an educated guess, but by God, it's a guess. And so if there's any question on that, assume the worst conditions. When we plan for our transits, we look at numerous weather sources. We look at every weather model we can get our hands on, and we look at the worst of those and add a fudge factor of it'll be worse than that, and we base our go, no-go decision off of that. So again, like you said, it's the get home-itis. Make sure you don't have to be anywhere at any particular time. That'll help you look at that worst, the most unfavorable weather forecast, and base your decision off of that. Because most of the time, that's what it is.
Yeah. Well, with that, I'd like to thank Adam, and I think this was pretty educational for me, and not so educational for you, but you know, I really appreciate it.
You bet. Glad to do it, and hopefully we might see you out there. If you ever see the USNS Guam out in the Far East, give us a call on 16. Be happy to talk.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. So, okay, for no rehearsal and no practice, it wasn't too bad.
You did really well, but you know, the fact is, you know, you train half your vacation, and then it seems like the other half you're training, you know, the Navy out there on the other half of your vacation.
Right, we do a lot of training.
So Kim doesn't really have time to see it because you're training all the time, or training others.
Ooh, wow, you picked up on that.
She complains about me training. That a good chunk of the vacation is dedicated to training.
Well, that's because Kim doesn't get to train you. You're being trained by other people.
and that's blasphemy.
I'm out of questions, Adam.
Okay, we can take a break.
All right, let's take a break. We'll be right back with you after this coffee break.
Non-alcoholic adult beverage coffee break.
If you like this video, give us a like down below and click here to subscribe. That really helps us. And if you want to watch more of us, click one of those.